Today on Cyberwork, I spoke with Gry Evita Sivertsen, someone who describes herself as, quote, an ambitious soul wrapped in a cloak of ISO 27001 experience. She's a consultant and COO, and before that, she spent years as a cybersecurity manager. Gry shows how an early experience in the Philippines shaped her cybersecurity career.
I got the role because they were looking for Norwegian speakers, but it was located in the Philippines. It was a regular IT support for a lot of different companies.
Why she learned not to be just a cyber manager for her team, but for the whole company.
So instead of me sitting and stating, now we need to do X, Y, Z, instead have this open dialogue where you're showing why there is a risk in place, what the threat really is, and then discussing with them. So what could we do to kind of avoid or reduce the likelihood of this happening?
And of course, we talk the ins and outs of the ISO 27001 framework and how you can get started on the path of becoming an ISO 27001 auditor, trainer, or implementer, whatever you want.
If you have these skills and have used them, it can be good to offer that competence to other companies in need.
That's all in today's episode of Cyberwork. The IT and cybersecurity job market is thriving. Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts 377,500 new IT jobs annually. You need skill and hustle to obtain these jobs, of course, but the good news is that cybersecurity professionals can look forward to extremely competitive salaries. That's why Infosec has leveraged 20 years of industry experience, drawing from multiple sources to give you, Cyberwork listeners, an analysis of the most popular and top-paying industry certifications. You can use it to navigate your way to a good-paying cybersecurity career. So to get your free copy of our Cybersecurity Salary Guide ebook, just click the link in the description below. It's right there near the top, just below me. You can't miss it. Click the link in the description and download our free Cybersecurity Salary Guide ebook. Your cybersecurity journey starts here. Now, let's get the show started. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork Podcast. My guests are a cross-section of cybersecurity industry thought leaders, and our goal is to help you learn about cybersecurity trends, the way those trends affect the work of Infosec professionals, and leave you with some tips and advice for breaking in or moving up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. My guest today, Gry Evita Sivertsen, describes herself as an ambitious soul wrapped in a cloak of ISO 27001 expertise. Brings many years of experience in information and cybersecurity as in-house head of information security, a senior advisor for several companies, and a leading role in Grittera. Her toolbox of experience and competence is considerable. As she puts it, quote, information security is not about creating a document to be put in a drawer. It's about solving a complex puzzle to connect the dots and find the missing pieces, create real value. Outside work, Gry loves to spend time with her friends and family and is passionate about women in tech. And she takes part in volunteer work around this, including mentoring, creating events, and more. So I wanted to talk to Gry because I am very interested in her career history as well as her work with the ISO 27001 framework, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. So hello, and thank you for joining me today from Norway. Gry, welcome to Cyberwork.
Thank you so much for having me here, Chris. Really happy to be here.
Oh, so glad to have you. Been long in the making, and I'm glad we were able to make it work here. So to help our listeners get to know you a little better, could you tell us about how you first got interested in computers and technology, information security, and cybersecurity? I don't know about Norway's educational practices. So I'm wondering if this is something that was like required in school, or did you find this interest in machines and securing them before that?
Yeah, so information security and cybersecurity is not really required in school. So how I got into it first with IT and computers was that after high school, I wanted to take a year off to kind of figure out what I wanted to do next. I saw this really cool work opportunity in the Philippines, Manila, and I kind of wanted to travel abroad and live somewhere else. So the job was related to IT, but I applied anyway, not really knowing much about it. Was lucky to get the role, and that was my first introduction to it. And that's also what motivated me to continue to do a degree in computer engineering. So with computer engineering, it was a lot related to programming and a bit more other topics. But my bachelor thesis was about companies, networks, and hacking. And that's what really opened my eyes to the field of information and cybersecurity.
Really cool. Now, how did you find out about this opportunity in the Philippines?
Through my sister. So she had
Oh,
seen it and sent it to me.
yeah, that's really amazing because that's such a big, to sort of lift yourself up at that age and transplant yourself. You had to go to the Philippines to do the work, I assume, right?
Yes, I was living in the Philippines for 1 year.
Wow. Okay. So what can you give me some of the aspects of what the job was? Like what I'm assuming like you said, you kind of took it as an opportunity despite lack of IT experience. Like how much did you have to kind of learn in the moment and what was that like?
I got the role because they were looking for Norwegian speakers, but it was located in the Philippines. It was for a company named CGI, and it was a regular IT support for a lot of different companies. So the typical phone line, they call in, something isn't working. Often the solution being trying to restart the computer. And if not, we had like this full library where we could search for like common incidents and kind of guide them through how they could resolve it.
Okay, that's good. So there was something of a flow chart there. You weren't having to solve every single problem for the first time.
No, luckily.
Okay. Yeah, no kidding. So, that's awesome. So, in your LinkedIn bio, like you said, and as you said in the intro, you describe yourself as an ambitious soul wrapped in a cloak of ISO 27001 experience. And indeed, you have a number of ISO 27001 implementation, trainer, and auditor certifications in your toolbox. So, we talk about this framework, ISO 27001, on the podcast sort of regularly, especially in the way that certain practices or certifications are ISO 27001 compliant. But I'm wondering, Gry, if you could tell us about ISO 27001 information security standard and specifically what interested you in it and how this immersive study in it can shape the direction of a cybersecurity student's career roadmap.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I was first introduced to ISO 27001 when I was working in-house in a SaaS company where the customer started to setting requirements for the company to get ISO 27001 certified. So connected with my interest in cyber and information security, I was so lucky to kind of take on this project. And what I really liked when I started to learn more and more about the standard is first that it was globally recognized as the best practices. And also, when you kind of get the full perspective of it and understand how it's much more about creating value and making those organizational changes to work more efficiently and securely, rather than just all these different types of technical controls that most people will associate with cyber and information security. I really like the connections there, all the way from strategy to understanding the biggest risks within a company and so on. And for students, I think it's one of the most valuable things to kind of get some sort of understanding or perspectives towards because of it being globally recognized. And especially now in Europe and Norway, we see a lot of requirements towards the standard with the changes in regulatory requirements. The easy route, or not easy, but the logical route is often then to pursue this certification.
Yeah. Now, yeah, can you speak to that as something to learn as opposed to, like you said, some of the more specialized ones like that? Now, how does that vary? Is it I guess I'm trying to understand, like, what's the sort of the first thing you learn as you start learning ISO 27001 and what are the first things you're looking for as you're trying to make, like, an organization compliant to this standard, and how does that maybe, differ from, say, some of the other big, security frameworks?
Yeah, so with the ISO 27001, I think the first is to kind of understand that the difference in the series because you have 27001 that explains how you build a management system for information security. So that is everything from strategy to the risk assessment, to management meetings, following up, and so on, the plan, do, check, back cycle. And then 27002 is a list of 93 controls that are best practice or kind of the risk mitigating activities that you should take on. and 27,005 being for how to do good information security risk assessments. And one of the main things that happens to newcomers starting to work with the ISO is that you invest so much time in 27,002. So all of these 93 controls, thinking you have to implement all of them and fully comply. And then you'll kind of get frustrated because some of the things won't make sense to your company. It's not logical. So, like the main thing to focus on 27,001, the short piece on how to actually build an effective management system that meets the need of your organization and your context. And based on that, naturally, the controls will fall into place.
Yeah, I imagine it's like trying to learn a language and just reading like that language's dictionary from cover to cover. It's like you're not going to use most of these words all the time. You just got to have to use the pieces that apply to you. And I suppose none but the most complex company is going to need all 93 controls at one time, right? So I want to ask, I guess, about where ISO 27001 certification and study comes within like the overall beginning study of different types of information security and cybersecurity, because you're essentially using this knowledge to help an organization analyze its existing information security framework and explain the places where it needs to be brought up to speed to be compliant. So is this something you start to learn only after you understand, say, the rudiments of information security, or do you kind of learn it in parallel if you want to do that kind of work with, say, like, basic routing and switching or, security functions and things like that?
So both is definitely possible, but you're gonna get much more value, and to really understand, you're gonna need that practical experience. So one thing is to kind of understand the material in the book. It's kind of like school, like you go to school, you learn all these great things, you show that you can learn, you have this base knowledge, but then when you start working, like it's completely different. There are so many other things to take into consideration. So it definitely needs to be mixed with that practical experience. And also for ISO training, they offer a range of different ones. So you can even start with like foundation, that is kind of understanding the basic terms, to further go on to like lead implementer, that you can lead a project implementing it, and so on.
Nice. Now, yeah, I guess that was kind of my next question. And I promise I'll get to your work history in a moment, but I have one more ISO question here. I know that you have certifications for several types of ISO 27001 functions. You're certified for auditing and training and implementing. So what type of work do people with these different distinctions of ISO knowledge and certification tend to do? Like what kind of job or career doors can be opened if you demonstrate strong skills in each of these areas?
A lot. So one is definitely consulting. If you have these skills and have used them, it can be good to offer that competence to other companies in need. If not, there's endless possibilities in house too. So if you're going more towards management, like chief information security officer or information security manager, risk management, and so on, that these skills will be very good to have.
Nice. So, thank you for that. I wanted to have you on the podcast today Gry, because our listeners have said that they get a lot of value out of learning about the different cybersecurity job roles they could be working toward, and to make sure that they actually want to do that path early on and make sure that that job role sounds like something that would, match well with their interests and skill specialties. So, for just over a year now, you've were a cybersecurity manager, and previously you were senior manager with PwC Norway, a company that offers a range of security advisory services. And since we started speaking, you've transitioned to another job role since June 2024. You've been head of Grittera Stavanger and COO of Grittera Security. So I wanted to first ask you about your role as security manager and then your responsibilities within it. The definition of our organization gives for a security manager, you're a senior level IT professional who plays a major role in creating corporate security strategies and supervising information security staff. Does that sort of map to your roles or responsibilities, or can you talk about some of the common tasks, projects, and responsibilities that you do as a security manager?
Yes. So when I was working as a security manager or head of information security in-house, I had the overall responsibility within the company for anything related to information and cybersecurity. What came into that for me was to get the ISO 27001 certification, help get the processes well documented and established to ensure that information security was incorporated and considered, doing the risk assessments to always know the highest risks that we were facing and discussing with the management mitigation strategies. I was doing the board reporting on security. And one of the really great things with working with information security is that you get the opportunity to work with all departments within a company, because security or information security is not something that's silo based or outside. It's about the information flow and securing the information in everything that the company is doing. So it's about understanding, how does HR work? How do they work in the finance team? How are we doing developments and so on? And then using the competence and controls that are best practice for information security to ensure that's adapted.
So yeah, so when you say you're a security manager, I suppose the first thing people might think is that you're simply managing the security team, but in certain ways you're kind of managing aspects of the whole company. So can you talk about some of those interactions with HR and other departments and things like that? Like what are some of the managerial skills that you have to sort of make sure that they're on board with the things that the ISO or your own suggestions, if you have to make a big change to the way that they do their security, like how do you get them on board like that?
So I'm very fond of good communication, and I think it's really important here when we're doing risk analysis and assessments, and we identify these risks. So instead of me sitting and just kind of stating, now we need to do X, Y, Z, instead, have this open dialogue where you're showing why there is a risk in place, what the threat really is, and then discussing with them. So, what could we do to kind of avoid or reduce the likelihood of this happening? And that way, they feel way more involved. They want to come with their ideas. They will better understand their processes, how their day to day work is. So as soon as you involve them and get their input and kind of combine their understanding of their working roles with your understanding of information security and best practices, we'll get way more motivation towards actually getting those controls and measurements in place.
Okay, I want to hopefully this is not, this is an actual distinction here, but what this made me think of is I've spoken to past guests regarding like risk management role, risk analysis, and a lot of things that they'll say are, they're making suggestions regarding risk strategies with the understanding that their company could just as well not take them. They can say, you really have to do this, you really have to do this. And they say, okay, fine, but we're not going to do that. And you say, well, my work is done here. Whereas I think with a security manager role like this, and especially when you're working with the dictates of something like ISO 27001, I'm assuming that you don't really have that kind of laxity to say, well, you should do this, but if I can't stop you if you're not. So is this something like that where you really have to kind of have, sort of be a little more insistent that you absolutely have to make these changes in order to come into compliance with this?
No, definitely. And this is where like accepting criteria come into place. So if like a risk assessment has been done, this risk is like really high, it's non-acceptable. And somebody were to like deny doing anything towards it, of course it would be escalated and they would just have to have to do it.
Okay, yeah, so you're gonna have to step in and flip the switch for them if they won't do it. Yeah. Okay, so that's great. I think that really does explain some aspects of security management there. Now, can you compare that to your current roles and responsibilities as head of Grittera Stavanger and COO of Grittera Security?
Yeah, no, definitely. So after working in-house, as you mentioned, I changed to become a consultant. So first for PwC, and now I'm at Grittera. So Grittera is a consultancy house in Oslo in Norway. It started up in 2020. And then I was so lucky to get the opportunity to start a new department for this company in the city where I live, Stavanger. What's really different now, also taking on the role as COO of Grittera Security, is to have that full overall responsibility. And with Grittera in total being quite a new company, it's just about using the creativity and kind of challenge maybe how things are done other places and look for the best ways to make, make success and grow the company. So a lot of new responsibilities. Like first, I had to find an office space. Started out from working from home. Now I'm in an office space, so that's great. Also looking for people to join the team, and I'm also still working as a consultant. So I'm working with different companies with their needs towards information security.
Can you contrast things you like or dislike about being a COO versus being a security manager? Because, like you said, you're definitely working one level up, and I suppose there's probably a little less of the, um, putting block A in tab, B or whatever. Like you're not working to these kind of specifications that the ISO provides you. You're kind of abstractly thinking in terms of overall operations under your own sort of ideas. Was that a big change for you?
The first job I had when I was working in-house was with a startup company. So I joined this company right before they had become a year and kind of uh, went through them through the whole scale up to leading vendor journey. And then going to PwC, where it's more corporate, the processes are set and such. Coming back to a company like Grittera, way more holds that kind of startup vibe. And for me, I'm quite ambitious, and I really like to create and make stuff and test out new ideas and yeah, be creative. And being able to do that in a completely free environment, I think it's a better fit for me as an individual.
Yeah, now I've talked to some of our instructors here at Infosec regarding certifications around security manager roles like the ISACA CISM certification, and the requirements in a lot of the training is moving away from people management skills and more into problem solving of security skills. Now, can you talk about how much of your work week, especially as a security manager, was spent managing, and how much was spent thinking and planning security strategies, for your clients?
Yeah, so it's been a bit mixed now since Grittera Security is completely new here in Stavanger. So it's only me. PwC and my previous roles, I've had a manager responsibility, so one to one with people. Now it's more with the whole team holding the team meetings and going through. But Grittera is kind of a unique consultancy house as it's more like a community of independent consultants, meaning that there's not much of a workload or requirements towards a manager because we only hire people who can work independently and we trust them to kind of have control. The main thing is, of course, to deliver good value to our customers and do well on the projects.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So you're I guess there's less managing in that sense, in that you're not really having to have the big talk with people or discipline or anything like that. So that's got to be a little bit different in that regard.
Yeah, no, definitely. Two of our main values is openness and fairness, and that's really shown because the level you're at in the company, it's predefined with how many years of experience, practical experience, where you have towards the topic you're working with. So there's no one kind of assessing or deciding what level you're on. It's based on the years of experience and open and known to all.
Nice. So I want to go back a little bit. We talked about your mastery of and the importance of the ISO 27001 standard and regulation, but I want to know if you have any advice in terms of gaining the management experience required in your role. We've kind of talked about this peripherally in terms of needing to be persuasive and being collaborative. Have you taken any course of study in management, or have you mostly learned just by being a manager? And if so, do you have any advice for our listeners to sort of demonstrably improve those skills? Because I know a lot of tech people, that's not their first preference. If they want to really get into the guts of the machine, they don't necessarily go into it because they want to be talking to people all day. But like, what are some ways that you have found yourself become even better as a manager?
So I've done a bit of training in-house with different companies. I think what's important for individuals to think about is if you really want to become a manager, because you can be really good within your field, but it doesn't mean that you want to be or would be a good manager. So to kind of distinguish the two, like even if you're pursuing and getting more knowledge and becoming more competent, it's not like the only route to go. But if you want to go that way, like I did, I think it's important, I would say, empathic, uh, openness, and really listening to your employees. I see the manager role as the person that the employees know that they can always come to if there's anything, a person that will genuinely listen and only want what's best and most well for them. So get their input, try to understand like their ambitions and goals, and take that role as how can you be supportive towards them achieving that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and it sounds like you at least partially an inbuilt knowledge and understanding of that, but certainly any amount of training can always sharpen these things as well. But so to talk to our the largest thesis of our show, Gry, is cyber work is about helping students and new cybersecurity professionals sharpen the skills needed to enter the cybersecurity industry, and as well as those looking to change careers to cybersecurity later in life, maybe from another type of management. So, speaking to listeners who might want to do this type of work in information security management and more, short of getting an opportunity in the Philippines like that, what are some early experiences or training or certifications or aspects of learning or projects that you would recommend people do to start to put them on the kind of path that you got on there?
Well, as mentioned, I think it's good to try to get like a basic knowledge or understanding of ISO 27001. If not, a really good tip I can give is a bit more details about my bachelor thesis, because it really helps you think. So the way the bachelor was set up is that we were three groups and you were set to create a fictive company. So you could decide any sort of company, and then you had to be that company, thinking about how are you gonna secure this company, and also securing endpoints. So you had like two laptops, and you were also configuring the network. So you got access to some network equipment. That was then the first phase of this bachelor assignment. The second phase, we were all set to try to hack the other companies that had been created to try to steal as much information as we could. And doing it this way, it really makes you think, because first you're kind of on the defense side, like, what will I do? But then when you're more on the attack side, you'll automatically think differently, and it will help you better see both perspectives. And to me, I was so surprised and shocked how easy it was to kind of find all these materials and learn with it, because we only had 3 months to kind of learn about and then try to hack these other companies. But like with Kali Linux, for instance, with a lot of pre-built tools and online, I was so shocked what we were able to accomplish in such a short time frame. So I think it's good to kind of maybe do an assignment like that and really sit down and think for yourself. Because one of the key things that I've seen and continue to see is that so much is kind of just thinking logically. And that's kind of the thing. If there are like within companies, there are these security controls that are kind of pushed or forced that just don't make sense. You don't understand why they're there, then they shouldn't be there, because that's not the way it should feel. Like, it should be logical, it should make sense, and there should be a real risk or reason to why you're doing the things you're doing.
Now, when you're in the process of trying to attack or trying to defend, I imagine that also gives you a more concrete sense of why some of the things that ISO 27001 proposes are there in those cases. Because, like you said, if something doesn't make logical sense, then maybe it shouldn't be there. But did that give you a better sense of like why things that might have seemed illogical at first were there, by actually sort of seeing how an attack is done?
Yes, absolutely. Like in my first role with the company being so new, we didn't have anything in place. That was also like a huge learning experience because along the way we saw all these like tiny things that one should be doing. Then most likely, like if you start up in a company that's been along for a while, they'll have all these things in place. But when you start out a place where nothing is in place, you'll understand why all these things are there.
Yeah, no, I suppose so. Now, I don't know, like it says, since you're working more with sort of high level consultants now, maybe this is not something you deal with. Although I know you mentor with younger students and so forth. What are some of the biggest skills gaps among people that you've seen who are trying to get hired into these types of positions that you're trying to fill? Are there particular skill areas or qualifications that you currently see lacking in some of the job candidates that you would like to become more universal, whether that's management stuff or certain problem solving or anything?
For my company and consultants, well, I think an important thing with being a consultant is that you're kind of able to show your skill set and also daring to kind of show it out to the market. So build a profile around you and your competence, and really daring to let people out there get to know you and what you can bring to the table. I think that's very important.
Okay, yeah, and I want to extend that also to uh, maybe people who are just starting to enter the industry. Do you see certain skill deficiencies in people who are maybe just getting out of college or just trying to start their first job? Like when you're trying to interview someone for an entry role, are you surprised if they haven't done certain hands-on things or they don't know a certain process, or are the kids doing pretty good these days?
From what I've seen, I've been really impressed with students. So we did some workshops where I set up this cyber scenario, and I was so impressed with the results. So looking back, I did my education also at University of Stavanger, and looking at it now, the subjects have completely changed. So information security and cybersecurity is an integrated part in this degree that I did myself, and I'm now working with it. But when I was doing the education, it was not incorporated. That's newer here in Norway, and it's really helping with the whole skill gap.
Oh, that's great. That's very encouraging to hear. I know when I came back to my high school, I was amazed at the stuff that they had that I didn't, and it's always a good sign when more educational opportunities are available for younger people than you had. That's always a strong sign of forward momentum. So, can you talk about your favorite parts of the work that you do now, Gry? What are aspects of your work that make you excited to keep pushing and learning new things every day?
Getting to know all these different and exciting companies, and I'm really fond of like creating and implementing. So I've been doing a lot of projects helping organizations go for the ISO 27001 certification, and I find a lot of joy in that.
That's awesome. Now, how long does it take on average for a company that you're working with to become ISO 27001 compliant? Is this a long term, like, do they need to do a year's worth of change, or is it something you can sort of suggest over the course of a month or a week, or how long is this process?
Now, this is probably the main question that is out there, and the standard response, of course, that it depends. And the thing is, like, I can, for instance, tell a company like exactly how long it would take me to document some security policies, do a risk assessment, and so on. But like with ISO 27001, what you need to understand is that the main thing is change. So is your organization ready for this change, mature, and have the time set off to really invest in doing it? But from experience, one company I was helping, it took 3 years, but it was very immature. We needed to get these like base processes in place and so on. This other company I recently helped, it took us 7 or 8 months. So I would say maybe average is about 1 year.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Do you get much pushback? I assuming if they want to become compliant that they're willing to do what you say, but do you ever get any kind of pushback of like, "Oh, we don't have to do that," or or is it just a matter of like, just it takes longer for some than others to sort of figure things.
No, definitely expecting some pushback. I think it's natural for any type of working area or roles. But here again, it's like so important with that open communication. And if there is pushback, there's probably a reason for it, and then it's good to kind of elaborate and meet halfway. So maybe there was something wrong with the way it was proposed to do, or maybe you can persuade and make the other party understand why you think they are mistaken.
Okay, that's awesome, and again, that goes back to great managerial skills that you bring to the table here. So great. Can you tell us about your work with the is it Tank TNK Tech Network for Women and the U37 Leadership Network? What are some of the things that these organizations do to help women and leaders from diverse backgrounds get involved in cybersecurity and technology?
Yes. So U37 Leadership Network, that was a network here for leaders under the age of 37 to kind of further build relations and discuss different topics among us that we would all meet in our regular day-to-day working life, being very young and in leading positions. Tank is something I'm so passionate about. It's a volunteer organization where we create this 2-day technology camp for girls from the age of 13 to 19. And we go around, we get different sponsors to sponsor the event. And that way we can also make it as a completely free alternative to these girls. And we've had such a huge success. So we had a camp now this summer, and we had over 300 girls gathered. And the main aim and why we're pursuing like towards younger girls is to help inspire them to the endless opportunities that will be there for them with working with technology. So we've been discussing with schools, like you hear back some schools try to put in more like tech related topics, but the trend I see is that like there's almost only guys signing up. Sometimes there's like a few girls, but because of that social dynamic, the girls often will feel like they're not included or not belonging. And because of that, they'll kind of change because when you're so young, that matters more than maybe what your real interests are. And also, we hear so much like, I don't want to just sit in front of a computer all day. Like, that's not going to be my work life, to really make them understand that that's not what it's like to work with technology, to make them really understand what it's all about. And looking towards the future, like more and more and more jobs are are coming relevant towards technology, like almost regardless of what you do, somehow you'll be working with technology. So we really want to inspire them and show them this. And we got a message from a mom after the camp this summer, because her daughter was kind of one of these typical examples, like no way she was going to work with technology. After attending the camp, she changed her application and completely like it's going to change her career future. And so happy to see that it's having an effect and really an eye opener for these girls.
Oh, that's a great story. I love that. Now, can you tell us like what kind of things are students learning in Tank over the summer? Like, are there certain projects they're working towards? Are there certain key concepts that you're emphasizing?
Yeah, so with our sponsors, they'll also come in and set up these individual workshops. So here it can be loads of different things like programming, or we had this like medical company in where they had created this game towards RP, like heart saving. So you were kind of like doing that practically, but it was connected to a game. Also in Tank, we bring in speakers because we focus a lot on on daring to believe in yourself and having that self-worth. And it's often you can see more towards girls that were insecure and kind of like maybe holding ourselves back, not daring to take opportunities if we don't feel like we're 100% a match. I was just watching. I was watching this talk at a conference last week, and there was this guy presenting who put it so well because he had seen so much with these open job positions. Like for girls, if they're not meeting the criteria 100%, they're not even gonna apply. But for guys, like as long as they meet like a couple of the points, they'll still apply. And he was saying it's like you could put out a job applicant for like you're looking for a pregnant woman, and you still would have guys applying. So works more.
Yeah, they're like, I could get pregnant over the weekend, possibly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll make this work.
So we want to reach them at a young age to really understand this. And we've also adapted a lot of the cybersecurity perspective for these young girls to understand all their use of social media, um, important things to consider and think about, and knowing there are networks around to kind of support and help you if you were to encounter any danger or bad activities related to it.
Awesome, boy. That's a great program. I love hearing about how robust that sounds and how wide ranging. So congratulations on being part of that. So we're just about at the end of our show here, but before I let you go, Gry, could you tell our listeners the best piece of career advice you ever received?
Wow. Now that's a big question.
Yeah, it could be from a mentor or a teacher or a colleague or just something you kind of picked up yourself.
Yeah. I think the main thing is to not be so afraid to fail. And if you do fail, not like overwhelm yourself with criticism or self harm, but instead look of it as an opportunity to do better. Because if the first time we're doing anything and you're doing it like 100% perfect every single time, that's kind of boring because then you have no further way to go or excel. So don't be so afraid to fail. Take those opportunities. Like, especially if there's an opportunity that's thrown your way, you get this feeling, I'm not so sure I can do this. That's the time you definitely should say yes. So that would be my advice. Next time you get an opportunity that your first instinct is to say no, say yes to challenge yourself and get out of that comfort zone.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, when I think of you know, points in my career life, I never think about the tasks that were super easy and I did it without any problem at all. Like you can't even remember those 10 years later, but the ones that kept you up all night or took a long time or seemed unwinnable, like those are the ones that really stick with you. So try and make as many of those as you can, everyone. This has been a great talk. I could talk to you all day. As we wrap up today, feel free to tell our listeners about Grittera Stavanger and Grittera Security and some of the services that you offer.
Yes. So we offer advisory services in everything ranging from leadership to technology. Um, so we're happy to support. We can also do remote support to different locations outside of Norway if that would be of interest. And in Grittera Security, we have a lot of experts in GRC, so anything related to ISO 27001, NIS2, DORA, these new regulations. We're here to help.
Love it. All right. So, one last question here. If our listeners want to learn more about you, Gry Evita Sivertsen, or about Grittera Stavanger and Grittera Security, where should they look online? Should they look to your LinkedIn? Do you have a social media presence?
Yes, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post regularly from real life examples and experience and the things I've learned along the way. So do feel free to follow. I also love it when I get these messages from people who's kind of struggling with something. If I could elaborate or make a post on that, it helps me boost their creativity, thinking back, and then I can also help someone out with something they find challenging. And for Grittera, it's grittera.no or grittera.com. So feel free to check out the website as well. There's a lot of details there on both our consultants, but also the types of services that we can offer.
Awesome. Yeah, I found Gry on LinkedIn, and I hope our listeners will find you on LinkedIn as well. So, Gry, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed learning more about your career journey and your work today. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
I'm so glad. So, thank you to everyone who is watching, listening, and writing into Cyberwork with feedback. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like to see on the show, just drop them in the comments below, and we'll do our best to get to them as quickly as we can. Before we go, don't forget infosecinstitute.com/free, where you can get a whole bunch of free and exclusive stuff for Cyberwork listeners, including our new career immersives, where you can, which can take you from career beginner to job ready in 6 months' time via a combination of live instruction, hands-on practice, and personalized career coaching that can fit any schedule. And of course, infosecinstitute.com/free is still the best place to go for your free cybersecurity talent development ebook. You'll find our in-depth training plans and strategies for the 12 most common security roles, including SOC analyst, penetration tester, cloud security engineer, information risk analyst, privacy manager, secure coder, ICS professional, and more. One more time, that's infosecinstitute.com/free. And yes, the link is in the description below as well. One last time, thank you so much to Gry Evita Sivertsen, and thank you all for watching and listening. This is Chris Senko signing off. Until next time, keep learning, keep developing, and don't forget to have a little fun while you're doing it. Bye for now.